There are days when everything weighs on you, your wallet, your heart, and the silence of those who pretend to be fine because of their children. Have you ever felt like this, trying to appear strong when inside you are falling apart? Well, this story begins with something simple but which carries the weight of a lifetime. 2 loaves of bread. Juliana just wanted to feed her daughters, but the world, sometimes cruel, gave her humiliation in return. And when all seemed lost, life did the unlikely. It put a stranger in her path, someone who, despite having everything, had forgotten what really matters. And that's when everything changes. It's not about money, it's not about charity, it's about dignity, compassion, and humanity. This true story, which you are about to hear, will show you how a simple gesture can transform lives, rekindle faith, and prove that even in the greatest pain, an everyday miracle can be born. Prepare your heart, because this will touch you deeply. Juliana held her daughter's hands tightly as she stared at the smell of warm bread wafting across the sidewalk. Poverty had been a thing of the past, but today's hunger seemed even more cruel. Without any money, she gathered her courage, took a deep breath and entered the bakery. She ordered 2 loaves of bread, promising to pay for them later. She just didn't expect dignity to cost so much. The attendant looked at her with contempt, as if begging were a crime. Within seconds, she called the manager, who did not even hide his humiliation. "This is not a place for begging." The words were sharp. The other people heard, but no one said anything. Juliana lowered her head, tried not to cry in front of her daughters, and left in silence, with wet eyes and even emptier hands. She knew it wasn't just about the bread. It was about the wounded motherhood, for the daily struggle that seemed invisible to everyone. That bakery symbolized the world, doors that close, looks that judge, and a society that prefers to ignore hunger than to lend a hand. And what she didn't know is that from the outside, someone saw everything, and that it wouldn't go unnoticed. With a heavy heart and an empty stomach, Juliana walked aimlessly, trying to pretend to be light in front of her daughters. Each step was an effort to keep her head up, even when everything inside her was screaming. Hunger. It was real, but she preferred the girls to feel the wind on their faces rather than the pain of emptiness inside. It was a silent way of protecting those who still didn't understand the weight of poverty. They arrived at a small square with a wooden bench in the shade. Juliana sat down and started a conversation, made up stories, imitated funny voices, anything to distract the girls. Even with her stomach growling, she did everything she could to keep smiles on their faces. Infancy, even in difficult times, needed a minimum of color, and in that moment, she knew she was fighting with everything she still had, her soul. While her daughters played with dry leaves and pebbles, Juliana looked up at the sky. "I thought about how life turns its back on those who only want the basics. Bread, dignity, a little peace. What hurt the most was not the hunger, it was the fact that no one noticed, as if the pain of the poor had become invisible. But in that same square, without knowing it, an attentive look began to change everything. Across the square, a well-dressed man was silently sipping his coffee, watching the scene intently. His name was Augusto, a discreet millionaire, owner of a technology network, accustomed to figures, spreadsheets, and quick decisions. But at that moment, none of that mattered. What caught his attention was the way Juliana hugged her daughters, trying to hide her despair. That image pierced him like an old memory. He too had a single mother. He too had felt hungry when he was little. He too had seen the shame in her eyes when she begged for credit and was humiliated. The difference was that back then, he was just a boy who couldn't do anything. But now he was a man who could change stories if he had the courage to act. Augusto didn't know who that woman was, but he knew how to recognize her, the strength hidden in pain. He saw there not only poverty, but resilient motherhood, the silent struggle of someone who refuses to give up. Something inside him broke, or maybe it woke up. And for the first time in a long time, he couldn't just go back to his routine as if nothing had happened. He saw it, and that changed everything. Augusto approached slowly, with the care of someone who respects the space of someone who has already been hurt by the world. He was carrying a simple paper bag, inside fresh bread, cheese rolls, and 2 juices. There was no arrogance in the gesture, only empathy. "Excuse me, I saw you earlier. I don't want to offend, but I brought this," he said in a calm voice, as if offering not only food but also human look. Juliana looked at him strangely. The fear of yet another humiliation held her back for a few seconds. But then she looked at her daughters, Manuela, hungry with shining eyes, Ana Luia holding back tears of hope. She accepted the bag with both hands, thanked him in a low voice, and felt something different. It wasn't charity. It was true solidarity, with respect and silence. Sitting on the bench, the girls ate as if that bread were the best in the world. The smell, which had previously tortured, now comforted. And Juliana, between discreet tears, gave her first sincere smile that day. It was just food, some will say. But who has ever felt the pain of social invisibility? You know, sometimes a simple gesture is the beginning of a life transformation whole. The next day, with clearer skies, Augusto returned to the square. He wasn't carrying any bags or fancy plans. He just had a genuine desire to listen. He found Juliana on the same bench, this time with her daughters playing around her. There was an old tiredness on her face, but also something new, a trace of hope, even if timid. He sat down next to them respectfully and began the conversation by talking about what he had felt when he saw them. Juliana listened in silence, surprised by his presence. Little by little she opened her heart. She said that she was dressmaker, who made dresses and repairs until she lost everything after her partner fell ill. Her life was turned upside down, and she found herself struggling alone with 2 children in her arms. She didn't ask for pity, she just told him. She told him that she had been a scavenger for a while, that she cleaned houses when she could, that sometimes she didn't even have time to eat. Augusto listened attentively, without interrupting, and within him the certainty grew. That woman was more than just a poor mother. She was a warrior woman, with a strength he hadn't seen for a long time, and that needed a response to match. Augusto took a deep breath before speaking. He said he knew the owner of a small clothing factory who needed someone who was detail-oriented, reliable, and experienced. It was a dignified job, with a formal contract and respect. Something rare for someone who carries the pain of poverty on his shoulders. He asked, without promising too much, "Would you be up for an interview?" Juliana took a while to respond. There was a mixture of fear, shame, and hope. It was hard to believe that after so many closed doors, aerial opportunity was opening up. But she thought of her daughters, of the day-old bread, of the sparkle in their eyes. And for the first time in a long time, she said firmly, "I do." As if that weren't enough, Augusto mentioned a community school that could welcome the girls with love and food. "No impossible bureaucracy, just real care," he said. Juliana brought her hands to her face, not in despair, but in relief. For the first time, she was no longer fighting alone, and hope, which had seemed so distant, was now showing signs of life. The following week, Juliana entered the factory for the first time. The smell of new fabric, the sound of the sewing machines, and the coming and going of the seamstresses made her nervous. Her hands trembled at first, but she soon found that firm and precise touch that only those who learned by sewing with love know. She was back to what she knew how to do, and now with respect and fair wages. Her colleagues welcomed her with simplicity, without judgment. The production coordinator, a demanding but fair lady, soon realized that Juliana had talent. "You have good hands, you pay attention to detail," she said. And that small compliment, had the weight of a medal, because more than a job, Juliana gained back something she had lost, this self-esteem. Meanwhile, Ana Luia and Manuela were beginning to adapt to the community school. They were happy, well-fed, with attentive teachers and new classmates. Manuela, more shy, drew hearts and flowers. Ana Luia was already making her first friends. Happy childhood, which seemed like a distant dream, began to become possible again. And Juliana, even though tired, returned home with a full chest. On Friday, the factory organized a simple group lunch: rice, beans, salad, and roast chicken. For many it was just another meal, but for Juliana it was a symbol of victory. She sat with her colleagues, laughed, told stories about her daughters, and without anyone seeing, saved a piece of French bread on a napkin. It was more than food. It was memory. It was achievement. When he got home, he handed the bread to Manuela, who asked in surprise, "Why, Mommy?" Juliana replied with an emotional smile, "Because it's just a loaf of bread. But for me it represents everything we've overcome so far." It was the kind of gesture that only someone who has been through the real hunger understand. It wasn't material attachment. It was gratitude. It was restored faith. Meanwhile, Augusto continued to watch from afar. He visited the girls' school, supported small projects, and discreetly stopped by the factory to see how everything was going. He wasn't looking for applause. He just wanted to make sure that the life transformation didn't lose strength. And every smile he saw from Juliana's daughters was like a silent reminder he had made the right choice in not ignoring her. One afternoon, Augusto went to the factory and asked to see Juliana. She surprised, stopped her sewing, and walked over to him with a respectful smile. Before she could say anything, he interrupted her. "You know, my mother was also humiliated for asking for bread." Juliana's eyes filled with tears. Not out of sadness, but because she finally understood that this man truly understood her. He said that, as a child, he saw his mother being rejected for trying to feed her children, and that for years, even though he was successful, he carried that past like a poorly healed wound. Seeing Juliana that day in the square was like a mirror, a chance to do things differently, to repair with empathy what before he only watched in silence. It was more than compassion. It was a form of emotional justice. The two looked at each other in silence. There was no debt, no hierarchy, no favor, only mutual respect between two stories that crossed paths for a greater purpose. There, sitting side by side, they were not the seamstress and the millionaire. They were two human beings who recognized each other in pain and chose to come together for healing. Because sometimes what changes the world is not what is given, but the way we see it. Over time, Juliana's work began to attract even more attention within the clothing industry. Her delicacy with fabrics, her attention to detail, her silent commitment, everything stood out. It was then that the coordinator called her. They were creating a new line of children's clothing and needed someone with sensitive look and practice with children. "We thought of you," he said. Juliana took a few seconds to respond. It was as if her entire life story flashed before her eyes. The no from the bakery still hurt, but now there was room for a new yes. A yes with dignity, with voice, with recognition. She accepted, and in that instant she felt as if the weight of years had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time, she felt part of something bigger. At home, she hung a newspaper clipping on the wall. A local article told her story. The photo showed her and her daughters sitting on a park bench. The headline read, "She didn't ask for arms, she asked for hope." The story went viral, not because of the pain, but because of the strength. The woman who was once invisible was now a symbol of overcoming obstacles, and without meaning to, she had fueled the faith of thousands with her true story. At the end of the newspaper article, a phrase said by Juliana stood out and was shared thousands of times on social media, school bulletin boards, and even in churches. "I just wanted to feed my daughters, but I ended up feeding the faith of someone who already had everything except meaning." A simple phrase, but with the power to touch where few words can reach. This speech reached Augusto, who reread it several times, on his cell phone, at his office desk, in the silence of his room. He, a man accustomed to speeches, lectures, and corporate decisions, found himself confronted by a humble woman who spoke from the heart. That sentence was a perfect summary of humanity that is lacking in so many places, and also the meaning he had lost in the midst of his routine. The truth is that Juliana never wanted to go viral. She never wanted to be a symbol of anything. She just wanted dignity, food on her plate, a happy childhood for her daughters. But, without meaning to, she became an example. Her story became a mirror for other mothers, other fathers, other people living social invisibility every day. And his phrase became a seed, a living reminder that even those who have nothing can rekindle the faith of those who have lost everything. Augusto could have gone on with his life as normal, but something in him had changed. He continued to attend the community school, now as a supporter. He financed improvements to the library, encouraged art projects, helped set up vegetable gardens. Never as a savior, but as someone who had learned that generosity is giving back what you once lacked, even if silently. On one of these visits, while carrying boxes to the reading room, Manuela approached with a folded piece of paper. "Uncle Guto, can I give you a drawing?" she said in a shy voice. He smiled, curious, and opened it. It was simple. 4 hearts, 2 big, 2 small, and, in the center, a loaf of bread. "It's our family. Mom, me, Anna, and you. This bread is from that day, remember?" Augusto swallowed hard. How could he explain to a child that for him that drawing was worth more than stocks or signed contracts? Manuela added, "Now we have bread every day, and Mommy smiles." That was when he understood. The gesture he thought was small became the foundation of a new story. And sometimes that's what changes everything. A gesture, a listening, a heart willing to see. Months later, Juliana and Augusto met again in the square where it all began. It was emptier, quieter, but the wooden bench was still there, like the memory of that day. They sat side by side like old acquaintances. They looked around, exchanged calm smiles. Now, the silence between them was light. It wasn't the silence of pain. It was the silence of mission accomplished, soul at peace. "You reminded me of where I came from," Augusto said. "And you reminded me that there are still good people in the world," Juliana replied. There were no promises, no grand plans, just a deep recognition. The real miracle was not the bread, but the courage to see the other when the world chooses to ignore. And that, at that moment, united 2 worlds that seemed distant. Augusto looked at Juliana with respect, not as someone who had helped, but as someone who had been transformed. Juliana, in turn, now carried more than scars. She carried restored dignity, rekindled faith, and the desire to give back, because she knew what began as a gesture of compassion could indeed blossom into something much greater, something that only the heart can explain. Sometimes all someone needs is a gesture, a look, a loaf of bread, and sometimes it is precisely the little, given with love, that turns into everything. This story is not about charity, nor about wealth. It is about courage to see the other, even when the world turns its face away, and how this could be the beginning of a quiet revolution. Juliana didn't change the world with money or fame, but she changed destinies with empathy, presence, and dignity. And Augusto, by not ignoring it, was also transformed. Because true change does not come from above. It comes when we choose to act with humanity, when we stop ignoring the pain of others and let our hearts guide our choices. If this story touched you, like this video, share it with someone special and comment below. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a simple gesture that changed everything? And of course, take the opportunity to tell us which city you're watching from. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now, because here each story is a reminder that it is still possible to believe in a better world.